Hello, 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 hello. Now, an embryo is suing. Wait, what? Yep, you heard me. An embryo is suing. The embryo is now suing the doctors. Well, okay. She wanted an abortion. Now the embryo is suing her doctors. Now, 4 years ago, in Arizona, and most of you know, you've heard of Arizona, the state of Arizona, and they became really big when there was a big old border fight, down there, and a homeowner that was a rancher and all that stuff. So so that's Arizona, and a woman had an abortion, the big A word. That's been a big thing the last several months since Roe versus Wade was overturned by the Supreme Court. And so it's been a lot going on with, you know, abortions in pretty much all of the states, especially the ones that have decided that women don't have any rights to their own body for the reproductive rights and things like that. And Texas has been a big major player. And okay, so she was not ambivalent about the decision. She was upset to learn she was pregnant. Now there are some women that's been upset to learn when they become pregnant, and some women are afraid of giving birth. That's true. And some of them just don't want to do it, and some of them just never want children. They just don't want that. There are some people, some women out here that's in that category, and we cannot deny it. Now, I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just letting you know that we cannot deny that those are some things that are in that fall into that category. Okay, so even so, Arizona law requires a pregnant person absorb a litany of information before terminating, and that usually is what they do for an abortion clinic. They want to be able to provide you a litany of information before you make the final decision to go ahead and proceed with the big A, right? So they give you this information. They also need to let you know it's medical information, like the risk associated with the procedure, and legal information, like the fact that the father will be liable for child support if you are the woman. I would say if the woman, not you, but if the woman carries the pregnancy to term. There's a big possibility that if he's the father and you do DNA, that he will be responsible for child support when you get the paperwork and the copy of the DNA, if he agrees to it and submits it to the court. Now, men, if you are involved in a situation, you always want to respond to the paperwork that you receive in the mail, because you want to be able to say you are or you're not the father. Because if you have suspicions or doubts or reservations, don't sign the birth certificate, get the DNA. Don't let it default on you and you wind up incarcerated over what you could have done to make sure you protected yourself at all costs. Now, and if you don't want children, let me throw that in. Protect yourself. Don't wait on the woman to do it. Protect yourself and value your seed. Unlike Nick Cannon out here going around making these decisions, and yes, I'm saying it, Nick, out here making decisions like this that are not a real good decision, whether he can afford to pay child support or not. Now, I want to throw another thing in here before we get on with this story. Now, there was a young lady on a channel. I won't say who the host is, but she was talking about she listened to Nick Cannon and she was taking this Nick Cannon advice like it was gold. And the man told her, y'all might know who it is, said to her, and I just happened to hear it because somebody was listening and I was in the presence of listening right along with what was said, because I heard it and they wasn't on the earpiece or nothing like that. And on this channel, this is where it was coming from. They said, you have the nerve to try to talk to me about Nick Cannon, and you going along with Nick Cannon advice. No wonder you're still living home with your mama and you haven't got yourself together and you dropped out of college listening to Nick Cannon, the same Nick Cannon that got a lot of babies out here. And Nick, right? Okay. Okay, so getting back to, this article here that we're talking about, or at least I'm telling you about it, and I hope you're listening to it. Okay, so in Arizona, okay, wait, child support issue, yeah, carried the pregnancy to term. Okay, so in Arizona, a person must sign a consent form officially acknowledging receipt of that information. Now, this is what they do in Arizona. Then wait 24 hours before she can obtain an abortion. The big A word. Now, the woman signed her paperwork and returned the next day to pick up the pills. She was definitely interested and wanted to proceed, so she went and followed through, and 6 days later she came back for a follow-up visit, and the big A was successful. Now, I don't take the big A, I don't take it lightly. Honestly, I don't. But however, I'm not going to get in a back and forth with any woman about their own body, because that is their business with their physician, doctor, Planned Parenthood, clinic, wherever you go. And if you have a relationship with Christ, that is your business and what's going to go down. I'm not getting in the middle of that. I am not going to. So please do not try to argue with me about trying to get me engaged in that, because I really am just reporting the news. This is public information, and I am putting my disclaimer out here, copyright, and all the other stuff that go along, and with the copyright. You know what I'm saying? This is for educational purposes only. There's so little entertainment in here, of course, but it's for educational purposes only, and it's public information, so I'm putting it out here. Now, I would like you, though, to tell me what you think about this, because we're going to get to the embryo is suing. Matter of fact, we getting ready to get to it, like, momentarily. Okay, so that's what I really want you to talk to me about in the comments, is about the embryo that is suing. Okay, so 2 years later now, 2 years, that woman's ex-husband, Mario Villegas, he created an estate for the aborted embryo and filed a lawsuit on behalf of the embryo against the doctors and clinic who provided the big A. Can you imagine that? He was able to create an estate for the embryo. Folks can do a lot of stuff that we don't know they can do, right? Now, is it something that can be found to be validated in the courts? I don't know. Is it something that they can win a case with? I don't know. I'm not the judge. But I am sitting here reading this, and when I read it before, I'm reading it again, because this is the third time I'm reading it to make sure I got this correct now, is that he set up an estate. So I guess I could set up an estate for my dog if something was to happen to my dog, right? And I could set up an estate for him. His name is Maxie, and I could set, I guess, an estate for him. He's an Australian Shepherd, and we can move forward. I guess I could, but he set up an embryo estate. Have you ever heard of an embryo estate? When I read that, I said to myself, you've got to be kidding me. Wait, what? And I had to say the same thing when the article spoke to me. The article, in my spirit said, yep, you heard me. You read that just right. Okay, so then he decided that he accuses, after he decided to do this, he accuses the clinic and doctors of failing to obtain his ex-wife. Now, this is ex-wife. It's not currently his wife anymore. Ex-wife informed consent. Now, how he knows she didn't get an informed consent? He wasn't there. She went, and she signed the paperwork. So we're going to tell you what she said, allegedly, in this article, because everything is really allegedly until so we got to say still allegedly in these articles. But however, thus committing malpractice is what he's saying, that these doctors in the clinic committed malpractice about this embryo, causing the wrongful death of his potential child and violating his fundamental right to parent. Now, let me stop right there, because you know what? It's always been that the woman gets to make the decision, final decision if she's going to carry a baby to term when she learns that she is impregnated or with child, right? And usually it's supposed to go something like this. Now, I'm not saying it goes like that, but it's supposed to go like something like this. If you are in a relationship, whether it's a situationship, marriage, partnership, engagement, anything of the sort, where you can get pregnant, and it's a man and woman, heterosexual, man and woman. And usually, don't you need to sit down to talk to the partner and say, you know, I'm pregnant, however you present it, baby, honey, sugar plum, daddy, whatever you want to call your loved one. Now, if it's a one-night stand and you don't know who the person is, you can't find them, okay. Or if it's somebody you was messing around with, different ones, they all have to be tested. Everybody pretty much in heard of paternity court, right? Okay. But however, normally you sit down and you talk about it, and then the man might say to you, well, you know, I want the child, and you don't want the child, but you come to a conclusion, well, you know what, I'll pay child support, I'll be there every step of the way. You've heard that, women have said that, and the man bamboozles and he disappears. Or you know what, whatever, I want the baby, but you know, would love to have children with you, but guess what, you have the ultimate final decision. So there's a lot, and you can put that in the comments, but there's a lot of different conversations and responses, you know, in the conversation. And then sometimes there's never a conversation. You don't tell the man that you're with child. You don't even tell them they could be a possibility if there were other men. You don't say nothing. You just say, you know what, it's my body, and I'm gonna do what I want to do with my body, my choice, my decision, and you go off like she did. Okay, so he's saying he has a fundamental right to parent. And see, that's been the argument with a lot of people, and men especially, because they don't have, they feel they don't have say so. That he feels he has a fundamental right, but they don't have say so. And I'll tell you, there was a case where this man was with this woman, and it was an interracial relationship, and the woman, you know, was lying to the man, the father, and his friends encouraged him to get signed up with this database, and he did. And guess what? Found out the woman was lying and had given up the child, and they was with foster parents, and the parents was getting ready to adopt. These foster parents was getting ready to adopt his daughter. His name came up in that database. Thank God he went on and did what his friends recommended he do, and he was able to fight his case and get custody of his daughter. But the lady had said he was unfit, all type of stuff that this lady had said about this man. But in the end, he won out. And you all might have heard that case. I'm paraphrasing and you know, and recalling it, you know, on what transpired. But however, this man is saying he has a fundamental right to parent. Now, what do you women think about that? Do you think that the man has a say-so in it, even though it's your body, but he helped produce? Because you know that if without the man, there will not be a pregnancy. Unless, and even if you go to a bank, you are going to get somebody, and it's a man's sperm, right? So even with that being said, do you believe that a man has a right in the decision before you abort the baby? And if the man decides to go to court, do you think that they can have the woman carry the baby to term and then give it up to the father, since the woman doesn't want to have anything to do with it? Now, we have heard of cases where the woman carried a baby to term to give it up for adoption, and that's what happened in that one case I was just sharing with you. And then it could be where the woman just don't want the man to do anything because she wants to just totally get rid of the baby and never have an attachment to it. And I think sometimes women feel that way, so they do that to never have an attachment, so it'll never be brought up again. But you know, there's a lot behind all of that, and emotional distress and all that stuff. But getting back into this article, last week, a lawyer representing the doctors and their Phoenix practice, Camelback Family Planning. And a lot of people fail to plan. They fail to plan. They fail to plan. And you know, Medi-Cal and Medicaid, depending on which state you live in, have something called pre-planning, where it can be covered if you qualify for benefits. Okay? But nevertheless, They made a last-ditch Camelback family planning effort to avoid a trial in the case, asking the judge to issue a summary judgment finding that the woman had indeed given her informed consent. Now, the woman was there. So in the depositions, the woman and her doctors, now hear me again, in depositions, the woman and her doctors all said, not some said, or he said, or she said, but they all said the same thing. And she knew, the woman, the ex-wife, she knew what she was doing. She was fully advised, and they did the big A according to Arizona law. The doctor's lawyer, Tom Slutz, says. Now, what's important is that the woman said she knew. She was very well aware. She knew she knew what she was doing. She was fully advised. She knew. She didn't sound like she was under any influence of anything, except for the fact that she was under the influence, that she was alert when she made the decision to go ahead and do what she needed to do. She did not want children by this man. She in fact didn't want them at all. She was afraid to have babies, and she didn't want to raise any children. And to me, it sounds like she knew what she was up against and what she wanted to do. She made an informed decision about what she was going to do with her situation, in spite of what the ex-husband is now coming out 2 years later. So now in that 2 years, was he thinking about it? Was he praying about it? Was he gathering information? Was he looking for an attorney? You have to ask the question, because it was 2 years later they're saying that he is suing. He has set up an estate and suing. The embryo is suing. Okay? So the purpose of the statute is to make sure that the mother is properly advised and makes an informed decision, and this young lady did. Now, Villegas' lawyer, J. Stanley Martineau, doesn't dispute that she signed paperwork consenting to the abortion. He argues her consent wasn't informed because, among other technical faults, the clinic's paperwork didn't use the phrase unborn child when describing the embryo, as Arizona's informed consent statute does. So are you saying to me that because Arizona informed consent statute does, that they were supposed to put that in the paperwork, unborn child? He also faults the clinic for not offering a printed out copy of the Arizona Department of Health Services website, which the law says can be made available to a pregnant person if she chooses to review. Let me stop right there. How do they know she said she declined it? She might have declined that. There are a lot of times, I've worked in the medical field and management for many years, and there are patients that will decline their paperwork. And now there is a thing where we can put patient declined, have it emailed to them, okay? And there are patients that don't want it, but because we have to give it to them, and this was before our system was upgraded to be able to send it through an email, right? And that they could decline but send it through an email. There are patients that get mad and throw the paperwork back at you. I said I didn't want my paperwork, because they don't understand that by law we need to give them their paperwork, because they may want to read it later and there may be some things come up that they have questions about. You're only protecting yourself and informing yourself, people out here that refuse your paperwork and throw it back at the staff when they're trying to help you, and they're also doing their job. That's part of their job legally, to make sure that you get your paperwork, what you signed, so that you understand. And if you have a question about a charge, a bill, the service you're having, it benefits you. Also, not just the hospital to keep them from from losing lawsuits. It benefits you as a patient. Even though I don't necessarily want my paperwork, I take it because I understand the necessity of it and the importance. So if you are refusing your paperwork, please reconsider that. Don't throw the paperwork back at folks. Don't be mad like the people in the fast food restaurant to be up here throwing food and getting mad and yelling and acting like Karens and Kevins. Don't do it. Just take the paperwork, put it in your pocket, put it in your wallet, put it in your purse, and move on. And if you don't like it, get home and shred it. Or then now you can do the email. Yes, just go ahead and email it to me, please. That's all is necessary. That's all. Okay. So if she chooses to review, maybe she didn't choose to. Maybe she said, I already know about it. I know enough because I'm tired of y'all holding me up and I'm ready to proceed. Maybe she told them that. Maybe she felt that way in her spirit. Maybe she just thought that in her mind and she said, no, I don't want that. So who is this attorney over here trying to say, that wasn't the case? He wasn't an eyewitness or an ear witness, was he? Was he? But anyway, it goes on to say if she chooses to review it. Then if you interpret the statute literally, any slip up in what kind of information you give is going to create a potential liability, Martineau says. Well, if you're giving the paperwork and you're reading it word for word and you're not skipping it, what can be the potential liability if you're going over the documents with someone? Because I know my team and in that department had to have training. We went over training. I did little giveaways by having them to study it doing in between patients, and we would do unit meetings, and in our unit meetings we made it fun, and they would have to, okay, well, what does number 6 say on the conditions of treatment? What does number 4 say? Explain in your words what this means to you. So I don't know about this attorney over here. See, sometimes people just bring bogus lawsuits, and I'm not saying it's bogus, but some people do. It is bogus at times when people bring lawsuits, and you've seen lawsuits that was bogus. Come on, frivolous lawsuits. And now you can set up an embryo estate and sue because, oh my gosh, I can see that you might have not been given an opportunity to decide if you want to be a parent or not. We understand that because men have rights too, and we need to understand that men have rights too. So I'm not saying that the brother, Villegas don't have rights, but what I am saying is, don't try to cook up something, his attorney, because you're not making too much of that sense. You're making some sense, but not enough where you feel like that you can just manipulate folks. So anyway, we're going to get back to it. Superior Court Judge Brian Chambers is considering the motion to resolve the case without a trial. Good move, Judge Brian, Your Honorable. Judge Brian, I don't know if you Judge Brian Chambers, excuse me. Honorable Judge Brian Chambers, that would probably be a good move. Don't take it to trial and waste taxpayers' money. Don't do it. And says he will come to a decision within 60 days. So I'm hoping to have an update on this within 60 days. But Villegas and his lawyer can already claim a kind of victory. See, you remember that attorney that was on the thing claiming that victory, and they pulled back that suit on that man that, he was on the Instagram celebrating, and it was just a mockery, and the people didn't like it. The other attorneys thought that was very unprofessional. Well, you know what? They already are successfully claiming the victory. I don't know if they should be doing that right at this moment. They successfully convinced the judge that Villegas should be allowed to argue his wife's embryo, whom they call baby Villegas, in legal documents. So they did convince the judge. So maybe that's the victory that he's talking about. Maybe that's it. That's the victory he's talking about. Okay. So even if they go to court and he argues that now these jurors are something else out here. Some of them was bought and paid for, some of them are. And that don't mean they going to rule in this man's favor. And then again, they could rule something about, he has a right to be a potential father. That's his legal right. But you have to look at the laws, right? But then again, they might say, yep, but it's her body. That's going to be a complex. Do you think that trial will be complex? Because they're going to say it's her body. She followed the procedures. And they might want to look at the paperwork. Let me see those documents of what she signed. Let me see if that informed consent has the same understanding that she might have took. You know what I'm saying? Because see, when we start looking at stuff, sometimes we don't get the same. We don't have the same understanding, and sometimes we do. And some questions are brought up would be different. So maybe some of the jurors are going to say, I want to question this. What does this mean over here? What does that mean? So if you take it to trial, you're going to have to go through all of that. So you will have to go through all that. You should anyway to get to the bottom of the problem, right? Before you rule on any case, right? That's some educated, smart jurors if you do it that way, right? So anyway, let's get back to this. So they successfully convinced the judge that Villegas should be allowed to argue his ex-wife's embryo, whom they call baby Villegas in legal documents, is a person for the purposes of the wrongful death lawsuit. So they're calling the embryo a person. Okay, so if the case goes to trial and if a jury ultimately finds in favor of the plaintiffs, it will be the first time that an aborted embryo has triumphed in a wrongful death lawsuit, ushering in a new legal threat, not just for doctors, but for anyone who can become pregnant. Now, the case was brought against the abortion provider, but it is required that the pregnant person, the ex-partner, be a witness in this case, says Dana Sussman, Deputy Executive Director for the National Advocates for Pregnant Women. And you know what? She does need to be a part of that. She definitely needs to be brought in because she was the one pregnant and she was the one carrying the embryo. So we cannot leave her out. And he's actually suing, I think, the wrong people. And if anything, if he was going to sue the doctors and the clinic, he also should be suing his ex-wife because she was the one that terminated the pregnancy. She was the one that made the decision, regardless of what he felt or even what he knew, because he may, I don't know if he knew or not, but she should be there. She should not be excluded. We have to start putting everybody involved, holding them accountable by having them to show up and be responsible for the decisions that they have made, right? And go from there. So anyway, Sussman worries that future litigants could use a similar strategy, suing for wrongful death, but go even farther by targeting the woman itself. I could see a universe in which an ex-partner, in an attempt to harass or terrorize or create fear in the pregnant person, would try to bring a wrongful death lawsuit against the pregnant person herself, in addition to the provider. Okay, Villegas' lawyers calls the judge's decision significant because Martineau says, in a way, it's saying that an unborn fetus has rights. And for decades, anti-abortion activists have been trying to establish both laws and case law that say exactly that. So they're saying that the fetus has rights. Now, the movement for fetal personhood grew out of Roe versus Wade itself, when, among other issues, the Supreme Court considered whether a fetus constituted a person with rights of its own under the Constitution. The justices ultimately concluded it didn't. But Harry Blackmun, writing for the majority, asserted that if this suggestion of personhood is established, Roe's case, of course, collapses, for the fetus' right to life will then be guaranteed. Ever since, activists have been lobbying aggressively to pass fetal personhood laws that radically reimagine a woman's legal rights the moment she becomes pregnant. Today, even 11 states, including Arizona, have broad laws that have redefined the term person to include a fertilized egg, embryo, or fetus, paving the way for cases like the one Mario Villegas filed. Before the Dobbs decision, federal protections for abortion acted as a kind of guardrail against some of the most extreme interpretations of those laws. But without Roe as a fundamental constitutional right, NAPW Sussman says, we are now starting to grapple with what exactly these laws mean in practice. For years, advocates have warned of the consequences fetal personhood laws could have for pregnant women, including the potential to rebrand any behavior that might pose a risk to a pregnancy as child endangerment. As anyone who has been pregnant knows, the list of activities that constitute a risk during pregnancy is virtually endless and can include pursuits as anodyne as consuming soft cheeses or sushi. In many cases, admonitions around risky pregnancy behavior aren't even grounded in science, but are instead based on the absence of scientific evidence, since the very idea of performing a study to quantify the risk would pose a risk of its own. Under the legal theory that a fetus is a person with rights, even simply crossing the street can open a pregnant person up to legal liability. In one case, a court allowed a woman who was hit by a car while 7 months pregnant to be sued by her future child for negligence because she failed to use a designated crosswalk. Can you imagine crossing the street and you could be sued if you're pregnant because you crossed a street? And if you cross the street to get to the other side, what most people do, just like a bridge, you take the bridge to get to the other side of town. If there's a bridge or a river or an ocean, what do? You cross the bridge. You go on the freeway, the highway, if you're in the car traveling. So, you know what? We have got to use some common sense here. Common sense. If I was on one side of the street And I had to cross to get to the other side. I'm going to cross. But they're saying because she wasn't in a crosswalk, she put herself at risk. Whether you're pregnant or not, if you cross the street and you're not in a crosswalk, it's a possibility you can get hit too. And you're putting yourself at risk, pregnant or not pregnant. But however, nevertheless, this is what they said happened. Now, according to an analysis by national advocates for pregnant women, personhood laws were already having far-reaching consequences before Dobbs, creating conditions in which pregnant women were either denied medical care or had it forced upon them against their wishes. But without federal protections, the group warns that these laws could end up outlawing or curtailing the practice of IVF in at least 30 states or requiring the adoption of unused embryos. They could hamper research that involves embryonic stem cells, determine whether or not a person is entitled to use the carpool lane, and change how much they pay in taxes or child support. Now, you know, yep, in the car lane, there was a woman recently, you know, was in the car lane, and she was pregnant, and she said she had a right to use it because she was carrying a child since Roe versus Wade overturned. And the judge allowed her to get away with it the first time. He dismissed it, but then now she's had the baby, so she is legally allowed to use the car lane. But prior to that, when they wrote those laws, they did not mean that you were pregnant and can use the car lane, okay? But she argued her point and she won. She got away with it. Now, the taxes. If you saying that you have a baby, you might have to pay, yep, change the taxes. It's going to change some things. Or child support. We have to look at all these potential things. Now, there is also the potential noted in NAPW's report for former partners to weaponize such laws to prevent their partners or ex-partners from obtaining an abortion, and which is true. And some of them can do it, you know, your ex might be angry and might want to bring charges against you, use it as a weapon against you because they want to just keep harming you because they're disgruntled. So you got to look at it, you know, look at that as well. That's a big possibility. And that's not something that has not happened in the past and is just not currently happening. I bet you there's many cases right as I'm doing this video that's going on right now where men are weaponizing women of, you know, and going after them. And it's nothing against men, but it happens in relationships. Just like women go after men for certain things. The only difference is men cannot conceive, okay? They can't get pregnant. They can conceive, help conceive. As far as pregnant, I will say it like this. Let me go back. Men can plant the sperm and the woman can conceive, okay? Let's put it like that. Let's say it that way. So anyway, in the past, the group found courts have been largely unsympathetic to the arguments men have made when trying to block their ex-partners from obtaining abortions. That's true too. We know that too. Men, you need to speak out on this. I want to hear your comments as well. But surveying the history of those failed cases, or I would like to read your comments, men, on this video. They note a marked shift in legal framing from the man's right to the fetus right, reflecting the rise of personhood ideology. Villegas lawyers argues that both the father and the embryo had rights that were violated by the woman's abortion. So guess what? Because it's illegal and Arizona say they followed the law, that clinic Camelback planning say that clinic say they followed the law, how come the woman, you're not suing her? I'm just asking that question. So Arizona's informed consent statute allows the father of the unborn child to sue if he was married to the person who sought the abortion at the time. Now, they are actually divorced now, but I believe they might have been married at the time. They were going through a divorce, but I don't think they were legally divorced at the time that she got the abortion, because she didn't want it when she found out, and it was at the end of their marriage, and I believe they were going through a divorce. Or yeah, they were going through a divorce or something to that effect, but they were still legally married, because you know, even if you walk away from a marriage and you with somebody else and you still married and you have not obtained a legal divorce, you are still married. Even if the you know you're not going back, you're not getting back together, but you're still married until that divorce is final. And people need to understand that, because you have a lot of people out here saying, well, they weren't married, they were still legally married. So there are laws that can protect partners, you know, married people. And also, I wouldn't be so quick to say, well, you know, when you get caught up and someone saying, well, you're still married, well, I'm not with that person. Well, you know, why fight over things that you think you deserve if you are saying, if you're so strong to say, before you get a divorce and you've moved on though, but you haven't got the divorce yet, or it's not final yet, there are people that are so strong to fight over things and want this and want that, you know, and say I have rights, but then they're quick to defend themselves when they are still married, even though they are no longer with that person because their divorce hasn't been final or they haven't even filed for divorce. I hope I'm making sense is what I'm saying, because there are a lot of times people want what they want and they'll play victim after the fact. And I'm just saying in general, but yet and still they're standing up for their rights when they say, well, I have a right to leave and move on. But if you're not divorced, you got to think about there could be things that could come up while you're still married before your divorce is final. That's all I'm saying. Okay. The complaint declares Villegas has experienced, now listen now, he has experienced pain, grief, sorrow, anguish, stress, and mental suffering over the loss of his ability to parent a hypothetical child. Now, do you think his pain is from his marriage ending? You think he's angry because his marriage ended and his ex-wife didn't want to be with him anymore? Or is he really experiencing all of this over the loss of ability to parent a hypothetical child? Because I'm going to get to this part about what the wife is saying. Throughout the complaint, his ex-wife is similarly portrayed as victim who suffered an abortion because the doctors failed to obtain her informed consent. Now, I'm going to get to the part, like I said, about what the wife, what this article says about this, her ex-husband. But in sworn testimony, she was compelled to give in the case, okay? However, Villegas' ex-wife is crystal clear about her desire to have the abortion. She describes, and this is what I mean by I was going to get to that. She describes an unhappy and ill-conceived 5-year marriage that ultimately ended with her seeking an order of protection against her ex-husband. Now, let me stop right there before I go on. See, that's what I'm saying. Is he angry that she didn't want to be with him anymore? Is he angry that she filed an order of protection against him? Because I believe that he's not suffering that much over a hypothetical child. I'm going to just say that. That's my opinion. I'm going to just be honest. That's my opinion. Because he could have moved on and been with someone else, and maybe it would have clicked and connected, and maybe the woman would be willing to birth the child with him together. But all I'm saying is, I go back, and when I was reading this, like I said, and I'm like, I'm thinking about this because she had to get an order of protection against him. And I wonder if they're going to use that if this goes to trial, because she had to get an order of protection against him. She didn't want to be with him anymore, and she was unhappy. And do you think that he's upset? The anguish is because she wanted a divorce, and she did get that divorce. She filed for a divorce. She got an order of protection against him, and she was unhappy. Like he couldn't make her happy. She wasn't happy with him. See, I would look at this whole big picture, because I'm just not buying that he was so, let me go back up here. I'm just not buying that he experienced pain, grief, sorrow, anguish, stress, and mental suffering over the loss of his ability to parent a hypothetical child. I'm not saying that don't play a part, but I just don't believe all of that has to do with that. I believe that it has to do with his broken marriage, his failed marriage. His broken relationship and his failed marriage. And the fact that he was no longer in control. Because if she really was, unhappy and in an ill-conceived 5-year marriage that ultimately ended with her seeking an order of protection against him, and then the fact is, he who has a previous conviction of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Now, I don't know if that was on her, but it says he had a previous conviction of it. And so the pregnancy came toward the end of their relationship, and she said as a surprise, since Villegas had a vasectomy before they were married. Take a breath right here. That's why I was saying it was the end of the marriage, but they weren't divorced. But anyway, they were on their way out, right? Now, Villegas' lawyer insists she was aware of her then husband's vasectomy reversal. So they're saying that he had a reversal and she was aware of it. She puts it very plainly in the deposition. I never wanted children, and he knew that. Now, I don't know when he had this reversal done, the V reversal done. I don't know if he did it on his own and went and did it and then came home and said, I did it trying to convince her to have a baby or get pregnant. Who knows? And it says she describes the fear of the pain of giving birth and her disinterest in being responsible for a child. She just wasn't interested in raising children. And some people will say that's selfish. You know, they would say that's selfish and things like that. Having one child, people can call you selfish just because you decide to have one child. I mean, I don't think it's really anybody's business how many children that you have if you're taking care of them. And if you only want one, that's your business. If you want 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, go on, that's your business. You taking care of them, or if you don't want any. If you just want to live your life free from raising children. And you know, children are a joy, but there's also a lot of stuff that go with raising children. Let's just keep it real. Children can disappoint you. They can break your heart. They can be disobedient. It's a lot of stuff children do that cause you to get upset and things like that. But also, you have to think about what you did as a child to your parents. And also, you know, children can be a joy. You love on them, you teach them, you train them, you correct them in love, you know. So, you know, it's a give and take, and you got to look at the balance. And it's expensive to raise children, especially if the father isn't there or the mother isn't there, because there's a lot of single fathers out here as well. So I'm just saying, it's up to people. It's their decision to have children or not, you know, but you have to protect yourself 100%. If you don't want children, then use protection. But obviously she relied on his vasectomy reversal to not use birth control, it sounded like, and so it came at the end. It was a surprise and she got pregnant. But she's claiming that this man knew that she did not want children, and she had described the fear of giving birth, pain of giving that birth, and she was disinterested in being responsible. And she says, I barely take care of myself as it is. The woman, who does not have a lawyer representing her in the proceedings, declined to be interviewed. Her absolute clarity of mind around her decision underscores the ways in which elevating and Embryo's rights instantly strips a woman of her own. The woman had a vision of her future that is incompatible with her ex-husband's vision of her embryo's future. Now he's asking the court to disregard hers entirely. Okay? Now, if the case goes to trial and the jury ultimately finds that the doctors violated the statute, the doctors could be fined, forced to pay Villegas' attorney fees, and possibly damages. Now, the medical license could be suspended or revoked as well. The case will offer a blueprint that could be replicated to relitigate abortions in the future. While potentially devastating, those consequences seem almost quaint this week, as Arizonans wait for a different judge to issue a decision that will allow an abortion ban dating back to 1864 back into effect. The ban would make abortion illegal every instance except to save the life of the mother and punish providers who violate the law with 2 to 5 years in prison. Now, who wants to go to prison and who wants to lose their license, you know, and be sued when people have worked hard to become, you know, licensed practitioners, especially doctors who practice this and are in that field? You know, you're disregarding the woman and you're disregarding the man is what the fight is about. And man, I tell you, it's like, man, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. This is complex. It's complex. But anyway, you all, thank you for staying with me. Leave your comments below. Let me think what you think about this. Go off in the comments about what you think in a respectful way. What do you think about this? And men, I want to hear from you in the comments, because this affects you also. When it comes down to you feeling like you have a right to be a potential parent, you have a right to this, and you have a right to be notified of the decision that the woman is going to make. You have a right to set up an embryo estate. Come on now, men, I want to hear from you. And women also, you too. I want to hear what you have to say, because it's your body. You have to carry the child. So please let me know what you all think. And because this is good. This is a good discussion, and we want to know, okay? So God bless you all on that note. And don't forget, the Copyright Disclaimer Act and fair use and all of that that goes along with it. This is public information, you all. So let me hear from you all, okay? Talk to you later. Bye.